So yesterday, as we have discussed, so there are some libraries which are listed above, but our the interest library for us is the UGART model for the univariate GART model. But there are some standard library like for say quant mode, which will help you to access the data directly from the websites, web data. Basically, you can extract the web data, and there are some other packages which are supporting packages, let's say for drawing the graph or doing some kind of analysis, some kind of it's like a cosmetic changes, whatever we do over the R for that purpose. We have XGS, we have DPLY library, and then we have performance analytics. You can also run those libraries, so it will project your graphs in a much better way. In more detail,
one question, please. Sorry, I just disturbed you. So there are sometimes in this stock return we take LN return also or log return. Is there any difference of that?
I'm not getting. Can you please come again? Your voice was little chattering. Yeah, please come again.
My point is that sometimes we are taking LN return also and log return also. Is there any difference of that?
No, see, it's a natural log. Either you take or log at the base of 10. So there is no. Either it is E-based natural log or it is base 10. So it is again depends upon
Any
which.
difference?
Okay.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Okay. Okay. So let us begin with. So again, I would be using the Apple stock. And after practicing this session, I would suggest you all to download the NSE data and do practice by yourself. Give your file to me through Biju, or I can share your email ID so I can assess whether you have done, practice. You have understood the concept or not, so I can give the feedback over there also. Okay, so that is the plan of the day. All right. So let's begin with. So first, we would be running these libraries. If the packages are installed, so these library would be run automatically. Otherwise, you have to install the package corresponding to each of the library. All right. So my libraries are running. You can say. So I'm just downloading the packages. It will take some time. So Apple ticker is denoted by AAPL. So it will be automatically fetching the data from the web, and I'm taking the data from 2008 January 1st January 2008 till 31st December 2020. So I will run this command. So it will take some time. So you can see now I got my data. So if I wanted to see my data, what I will be doing, I will be just clicking it here, and you can see my data is here. So this data is having the 4-5 columns. It says open, high, low, close, volume, and adjusted prices. So this is the price data. But we are more interested to doing the analysis with the closing price. Most of the time we do like that. There is no hard and fast rule. There are some cases where we use open, high, and low also. Again, depends of your interest. But right now I'm taking the close data in my practice session. So I wanted to plot the graph for the close data. So when I'm plotting the graph, you can see this is the chart here. Okay, this is the chart. Is it visible to all of you?
Yes, ma'am, it's visible.
Okay.
Ma'am, this data is extracted from which website? Prashant sir is asking.
Actually, it's a web, so it can be extracted from anywhere wherever it is available. So basically,
okay. R itself extract from where
it is Yahoo. So you can see it is taking it from the Yahoo.finance. Okay, yeah. So right now, because most of the time the data is available on the Yahoo.finance, so it is available there. So okay, fine. So what I will be doing, I will be saying particularly closing price in a new variable which is called Apple close. Okay, so this is my new variable, and if I wanted to see the headers of this new variable, so I can write head and this new variable. So I can see the head. What happened? Just a second. This is spelling mistake. Okay, so you can see it will just show you the heads here. Okay, so this is the procedure. Now, in my yesterday's file, you might be wondering there was one command. Hello. Hello.
Yes, ma'am, we can hear you.
Yeah, there is some voice coming, so I thought somebody is asking questions.
I'll check it, ma'am. I will mute them. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, please. I thought they are asking questions to me, so I stopped. Okay, so in yesterday's command file, you might be wondering there was one command which is called writing data from R to Excel. So here, what I have given you, I just given you the command so that you can further manipulate as per your directory. So here I'm saving my files to the D directory, and this is my folder. And then you can write this write dot table. So there all the Apple data which is coming from the Yahoo Finance, or let's say from the web, that you can download in your particular folder. So let's say if I run this particular command, so I'm running this command, okay, and then my data will be downloaded in my directory. Now, this is a little introduction about how to write the data and all. Now coming to the main part, I want to calculate the return of the apple. So there is a formula. As we know the formula, but in the R language, the command is calculate returns. So once you click on the calculate returns, you will get the calculated return. Now let me show you the head of the return, and then why I have used the minus one. I'll show you the reason. So you can see whenever we are calculating the return, so our first observation is null, because our data, let's say starting from the 1st January, or let's say 2nd of January 2008. So above that we don't have any observation. So whenever we are calculating the log of the return or ln of the return, or let's say the first difference of the data, at that time we don't have any other observation. So first observation is always null for us in the return file, right? So because this is a null, this is a blank cell, so we wanted to remove this cell, otherwise it will create a problem for the further calculation, especially in the R. So what I would be doing, I would be removing this first cell which says there is no observation. So what I would be doing, return is equals to return minus 1. This minus 1 denotes the first cell. So once I would be running this particular command, and then again I would be seeing the head. So you can see my first observation of the 2nd January 2008 has gone. Okay, so now my observations of the return file will start from the 3rd of January 2008. Now coming to the histogram plot. So see, you can see there is a histogram plot, and by seeing the histogram, my first observation as a researcher, or as a if I'm as an analyst, that I can say that this is not the normally distributed curve. This is not the normally fitted data series. Okay, so this is my first observation after seeing the histogram. Then I can further plot the density curves here. So this will give me more better understanding about how the data is behaving. So after plotting the data density curve, what I found, so there are, you can see there are blue lines, which is the actual data, blue bars, which is the actual data. Then we have a red curve, then we have a green curve. So red curve belongs to the normal distribution, okay? Because I have already given the command here. You can see add dot normal, which I have asked to be plotted in the red color, whereas the add dot density, which I've asked for blue and green. So this green curve shows the fitted curve. Okay, this is the fitted curve. What is the best fit to my data available right now? So after seeing that particular distribution, what I understand is my data is leptokurtic because it has a higher P. All right. This green curve basically denotes that my fitted data is leptokurtic. It is having the high peak and it has the flatter tails. Okay, and the red curve shows the normal curve. So by seeing the curve itself, I can say my data is not normally distributed and not behaving normally. Now let me see the return series. Okay, so once I plot this command, when I run this command, so I will get the return series, and you can see this is my return series. All right. So this return series says my first observation without knowing anything about the data. My first observation says that it has volatility clustering at some places, because there at some places the observations are getting clustered and the volatility is very high, going up and down. There are high peaks, high observations going beyond the. So these kind of behavior mostly occurring near 2008 2009 period, and at the end we can see somewhere January 2020, somewhere in January to December. Okay, in between also we have a lot of fluctuations, but on an average my return series is lying around the mean. Okay, so this is my characteristic of the return series. Now coming to the, now I wanted to check my serial correlation and volatility clustering. I'm just repeating the yesterday's talk, that you will be brushing up what we have discussed yesterday. Then we'll move forward. So if I wanted to plot the serial correlation of Apple return, I will run the ACF. So this is the function called auto correlation function. So when you are running this command, you will get the auto correlation of return series. Now here, what I discussed yesterday, that if your observation or if your bars are crossing the blue band line with a 95% confidence interval, and they are occurring, they're crossing it number of times, so you can say there is a autocorrelation. But when there is very random behavior in the bars, so you can say there is no serial correlation or autocorrelation. So what I concluded from this kind of graph, can you please mute the background? I request you again and again, can you please mute the background? All the participants, please mute the background. It's really difficult for me to continue further otherwise. Okay, so what I found that there is no serial correlation and autocorrelation in this data series. Now I wanted to check the volatility clustering statistically. I wanted to see, as well as what I've observed by visualizing the graph. So what I would be doing, I would be taking the absolute return and plotting the ACF curve. So while plotting the ACF curve, what I found, there is a my hunch was correct. After visualizing the graph, I had the hunch of volatility clustering, and that my hunch is correct. As you can see, the most of the bars are crossing the blue band line, which is the confidence interval. So it says that the data series is having the volatility clustering. Now, this was the talk we discussed yesterday, and then I run the Gauch model also, that I will be doing in due course. Now, today, if I wanted to see what is the standard deviation of my return series, so there is a function of standard deviation. So when I run this standard deviation command, I will get the standard deviation, and this is my standard deviation, and how much it is? It is 0.020. It is for the entire series my standard deviation. Now, if I wanted to have the annualized standard deviation or volatility of my series, so basically we assume that in 1 year we usually have 250 to 252 trading days. It may vary. Okay. So we will take the square root of 252 multiplied by the standard deviation. That will give us the annualized volatility. Okay. Sometimes people may get confused how to calculate the annualized volatility. So this is the way of calculating the annualized volatility, right? Now, if I wanted to calculate the annualized volatility, particularly at the end of 2008, let's say. So I have a 2008 data, how to calculate the annualized volatility of the year of 2008. So this is the command for that. here I would be taking the return of 2008 only, standard deviation, and then multiplying by the square root of 252. So this will give me only 2008 annual volatility, and this is 58%. You can see at that time in the graph also it was showing that 2000, near 2008 2009 we have a highly volatile series. So you can say you can see here that our volatility value or the annualized volatility is nearly 58%, right? All right. So if you wanted to plot the rolling chart of annualized volatility, then
Madam,
yes,
you said that adjusting factor that converts the daily standard deviation into annual standard deviation.
yes,
They're multiplying by square root of 252.
yes.
Ma'am, how this basically comes from this coefficient comes from the square root of 252, because if we are supposed to convert them into quarterly or any other monthly or say any other issue, how we will be converting them?
See,
That's
there are
why I'm
different procedure. There are different procedure, but the point is, if you first you want to analyze the volatility on the daily basis, then you have to multiply it by square root of 252, because we assume in a year number of trading days are either 250 or 252 at max. So this is 252, right? So that is how on yearly basis we calculate. If you wanted to calculate on the monthly basis, so nearly we say we have a 22 trading days in a month. So likewise quarterly also you can multiply it, yes, square root of 22 volatility curve on monthly or the daily basis. So there is a volatility curve which I'm plotting it here from 2008 to 2019. So there is a plot you can see. Just wait, it will be plotted. So this is my monthly plot of rolling volatility. Okay, so here this volatility curve will give me again a hunch that near 2008 2009 my volatility was at peak, right? You can see it here. It is crossing even the one band. And here in 2009 19, okay, so I plotted till 2019. Just wait, let me just redefine it, make it 2020. Yeah, let me plot it again, so because we have the data till 2020, or I can make the plot. Now you can see it here. I think it is visually clear that we can see near 2008 2009 we have very high jump in the volatility, whereas 2020 January till December you again got peak. So as you can see, everything is mapping together, right? Whatever series we had, the observations, the way they are behaving, then we are plotting the volatility. We can also find there is a evidence, there is a clustering. The high volatility is followed by the next high volatility, and the low level volatility is followed by low level of volatility. So this is the monthly plot. We can also have the daily plot. This will be more a smooth curve. Just a second, the command is running. Okay, so this is my curve for the daily volatility. Okay, now you can see it here that our volatility is very high and it is sharply dropping from high level to low level from 2000 to 2009, whereas when we see 2020 year January to December, our volatility is again rising up. So this is again up and down is going on, but high level of volatility is occurring somewhere 2009 and then to 2020. So of course we do have the reason for that, and in between there are up and downs. So there are reasons definitely, but two reasons which I can quote here for 2008 9 we have the global financial crisis which hit across the all over across the markets very hard, and in 2020 2019 we have the novel coronavirus cases, so that also hampered the stock market a lot. So now let's move for the standard Gauge model with the interpretation that I discussed yesterday, but I'm repeating it again. For the, as I said, for univariate Gauge model, you have the library which is called UGauge, and then you will make the specifications for the Gauge model. So Gauge model basically have three set of equations. The first set of equations is about the mean model, which is the mean equation. Second equation is called as variance equation, and in the model we write variance model. And third one is the distribution. Okay, what distribution we are using. So in U-Gauge model, how do we specify? So there is called function U-Gauge spec. So this is the way we write in the function in the R. We write variance model. Okay, one more thing. There is no difference if you write the mean dot model first and then variance dot model second. The order does not matter here. You can write mean dot model first and then you can continue with variance dot model. This is not at all a problem. But we write it like I wrote it like that. Variance dot model is equals to list model. S gauge denote the standard gauge. Standard gauge, I'm using standard gauge model, and then we have a gauge order which is 1,1. We are using only one lag of the volatility and one lag for the error term. Okay, if you remember the equation last time we discussed, which was mean equation was RT is equals to A naught plus under root of HT epsilon T, right? Whereas the variance equation was HT is equals to alpha naught plus beta 1 HT square T H square T minus 1 plus alpha 1 epsilon square T minus 1. Epsilon square T minus 1 is known as the arch effect, whereas H square T minus 1 is H square T minus 1 is known as the gauge effect. So this is called the gauge order 1,1. Okay, so I'm taking one lag arch effect, one lag gauge effect. Then we have the mean model. So mean model is the constant mean model. I'm using it here. Distribution model is my norm. Norm represents the normal distribution. All right. So at the beginning, we always start with the basics. So we assume the data is normally distributed. So I'm running the normal distribution model in the gauge 1,1. Now there is another, after running this equation, which I will be running it here. Okay, where's the problem? Just a second. Just a second. Okay. Okay. So when I will run this equation, so this equation has been run. Okay, you can see this equation is run. Now we have to fit the gauge model. For fitting the gauge model, we have the U-Gauge fit specification. Under this, we used to give two terms. One is the data, which data you wanted to fit, and then what is my first model result. So which is Sx is equals to n. So I'm fitting the model. You can see I fitted the model. Now I wanted to see my output. This is my output. Now I want a very close attention of all of you, so that you can give a close you can understand what is this gauge model and how to read out the result, because I think that is the most important. When we read the papers or when we do the analysis, we should first understand what the results are saying to me, or how do we go about it, how we can improve further if required. So as you can see, this is the conditional variance dynamics of the gauge model. So my gauge model is S standard gauge 1,1. Mean model is ARIMA terms we have 0, 0, 0, and distribution is norm, that is normally distributed. Now coming to the optimal parameters. So these parameters which are listed here are same as what we listed in the equation, only the notation is different. For example, mu denote to the A naught of the mean equation, omega denote to the alpha naught of the variance equation, alpha 1 denote the coefficient of error, and beta 1 denote the coefficient of volatility, lag value of the volatility, which is ht minus 1. All right. So you can see all the coefficients are significant, because we have the probability value which is less than 5%. That means we are rejecting the null hypothesis, which says the coefficients are not significant, and we are accepting the alternative hypothesis. So here you can see our beta 1 coefficient, which is the coefficient of the lag value of the volatility, is 0.84%. 84%. That means our present volatility depends upon the past value of the volatility, which is dominating 84%. 84% they are my current volatility is being explained by the past volatility, whereas the 12% remained is being explained by the error term, past value of the error term. I hope this is understood to you, all of you. Now, the next important thing what we need to see is the information criteria. So there are a number of information criteria like KK, bias, and Sebata. So here what we'll be doing, we have to, when we are running the number of models, sometimes you come across research paper which talk about that they have run number of batch model, but they wanted to select which one is the good fit. So they also look into the information criteria, and whichever information criteria, whichever model is having the lowest information criteria value, that model is much appreciated as comparison to the other models. Okay, so this is the other important thing. Now coming to the third thing, which is the weighted L-Jung box test on the standardized residuals. So that talks about that my null hypothesis says that whether my residuals are serially correlated or not. So this is basically for the diagnosis of the residuals. Okay, so that also very important when we run any of the models. We also want you to see the behavior of the residuals. So that also defines whether my model is a good fit or not. So here you can see my null hypothesis is being accepted, which says no serial correlation among the residual standardized residuals. Okay, so that means my my residuals does not have the serial correlation.
Ma'am, may I ask you something here? Sorry for
Yeah,
interruption.
yeah, please.
So, you can just move slightly up on those mu and those results,
Yes,
those
yes,
coefficients which we estimated. So, ma'am,
yes.
here after seeing the results of alpha and this one, next
Beta,
one,
beta one.
the beta one. So, can I say that this 84% is the conditional volatility that we are assessing here, and 12% is idiosyncratic volatility?
Correct, exactly. You find it very correct.
Yeah. And ma'am, is it possible to extract this idiosyncratic volatility if at all I want to estimate and I want to use it
Yes,
for?
yes, yes. I will show you how to estimate. Let me read out the results and
Okay,
then I
ma'am.
will show you. Okay, I'll
Sure.
show you.
Thank you.
This is the
Thank you.
plan of the day, how to extract
Thank
the
you.
coefficients and all. Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
So
Thank you.
yeah. So okay. So find my residuals does not have any serial correlation. Now coming to the next part, which is very much important. Rest of the things are okay, fine. Now coming to the Pearson goodness fit or fit test. So this is corresponding to the model. This will say whether my model. So my model was standard Gauge 1-1 model with the normal distribution. This is my model. So this says whether my model is a this statistics are going to understand that whether my model is a good fit. So I discussed first, if you have a couple of models, you can comparison the information criteria. But let's say if I run only the normal distribution, then how do I understand if I don't have any benchmark with me? How do I understand that whether my model is a good fit or not, or to improving the model or not? So you need to see the goodness of fit test. So if you look at the P statistics, so so my null hypothesis that this model is a good fit model. I always assume whatever I do is always correct. That is the universal understanding. Whatever we do is always correct. So basically, what is the null hypothesis? My this model is correct. But when you look at null hypothesis, what they say is when you look at p values, what do they say? They say that no, my p values are not even significant. They are 0, 0, 0. So I mean they are significant. So we need to reject the null hypothesis. That means my model is not good fit. So there is a scope for the further improvement. Now, if you map everything in your mind, what I have discussed so far from the beginning till now, so if you look at the density plot where I was talking about that normal distribution is not the best fitted distribution for my data, and now my GARCH results are also telling me that when I'm running the normal distribution model with the GARCH 1-1, this is no, this is not the good fit model. I have the scope for the improvement. Can you correlate the things together? All of you.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you correlate? Yeah,
Yes,
can
ma'am.
you correlate the things? Now you visualize by your own that so far what we are discussing, everything is aligned, right? So that says that my normal distribution curve is not best fit curve for the data. And when I run the normal distribution in the GACH11 model, that also says that there is a scope for the model and we can further improve our model, we can further improve our GACH model, right? So this is for, this is how you read the results. So these kind of results will keep on appearing for every time when I'm running the different model. Now your task would be to analyze all those results and to understand with your intelligence that the which model is the best fit, and there your descriptive statistics, like whatever we have visualized, they also plays a very important role. So first of all, you always go for the descriptive statistics for any of the data when it comes handy to you. Are you getting my point? It's not always good to run any of the model. First, to look at the data, see the behavior and the pattern of the data, then try to understand the behavior. Then, if you start running with the basic model, you will automatically understand what the data is talking and how you have to further improve your model, right? Okay, now the important thing which I did not discuss yesterday, how to plot all the things together. So this is one of the very good, command, and you will like it. Instead of plotting everything one by one, you can see everything in one plot. Can you see it here, all of you? Can you see this plot? Okay, so here we are having the serial correlation of the conditional standard deviation. Then we have the VAR limits for the series. Then we have the conditional standard deviation series. We have the autocorrelation of the observation, which we already plotted before. Then we have the autocorrelation of the squared observation. Yesterday, somebody was asking that why do we go for the absolute observation? Why not the squared observation? So here you can see we have absolute and squared observations both. And in both the cases, the evidence says that there is a volatility clustering. Okay. And then you have the cross correlation graph for the observations, right? Now you can see there is a plot also, density plot of the residuals, but residual density plot is more or less the more or less it's not normal, but it's appear to be normal. Okay, and then we have a normal QQ plot. Now looking at this graph, this is very important, this particular graph, normal QQ plot, that says that my residuals are not normal. If your plotted line, which is in blue color, if it is not coinciding with the this what we say, this this black line, or you can say this straight line, then you can say that your residuals are not normally distributed. And in this graph also, upper one, empirical density curve of this standard residual, I said it appears to be normal, but this is not normal, and this is clear by the norm QQ plot. As much deviation you have the plotted line from the mean line or the black standard line, you can see that my residuals are not normally distributed. And if they are not normally distributed, that model is not a best fit model. Okay. Okay, this is the news impact curve, since we are using the symmetric GATS model. A notice of these things. Now, how do you generate this plot? You just write plot fit n, which is equals to all. So this is the command that you can use. Now, how to extract the parameters, as somebody is asking me. So let's say I wanted to extract the coefficients. Okay.
Madam,
Yes. Yes.
madam, in the plots you showed the cross correlation, ma'am. What is that actually?
Okay. Cross correlation means that you wanted to see the observation of actually the point is here we are having a similar time series data, but when you have a two time series data, the cross correlation is more we can say more important at that time, because there you are seeing the correlation of one series with the other series. That is called the cross correlation. Okay, you are cross means there are two series and then you wanted to see the correlation of one observation corresponding to the other observation. But in my case, in particularly this financial time series data, since I have only one time series data, so my serial correlation or the autocorrelation is more significant or more relevant to me. Why? Because I'm trying to see I'm trying to see the correlation of present observation with the past observation in one particular series. But if you have a two series, you wanted to see the cross correlation, then that there it is more significant. I hope I made it clear. It would be more important for you when you have multiple time series with you. Okay.
Ma'am, multiple time series, that means as we are using univariate guards, that means the variable should be the single one.
Single one.
That means the apples return.
Apple
Then
returns.
we will be classifying the whole time period into two series.
Two series means I'm not getting. What is the two series?
And then how will be this apple return will be classified into two time series data?
No, here, see, if you read the graph header, it says the cross correlation of squared versus actual observations. Meaning to say, you have the actual observations, that is the log of the return, right? And then the software generating one more time series, which is the squared of the observations. That means that they are squaring of the log of the returns observation. Are you getting my point?
Yes.
So there it will become two series.
Okay.
Okay. So then they are taking the cross correlation, but the concept is same. Cross correlation always come across when you have a two time series. So this particular software or this particular graph says I have two time series. How it comes? First you have the actual observation. This is my return series, and second is my return square series. Are you getting my point?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, did you understand the concept? Because this concept will be useful for the other kind of analysis when you have multiple time series data and then you are doing the analysis. You wanted to check the cross correlation. Are you getting my point?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, fine. And autocorrelation is basically I have one time series and I'm checking the correlation of my, let's say, present observation with my past observation, or let's say present observation with the observation which is one time ahead. Okay, it's a similar time series. Okay, so this is my autocorrelation. This is a single time series. Okay,
And
now
ma'am, one other issue,
Huh.
there is, ma'am, in the optimal parameters,
where
you
it is optimal parameter, where it is.
ma'am, not in this graph, ma'am, the parameters you obtained, that mu,
Okay.
omega,
Mhm.
that
Yes, please carry on with your question.
ma'am, there is robust standard errors. That means whether it is adjusted for the possible heteroscedasticity in the data.
So, so there won't be any kind of adjustment of the heteroscedasticity. Robust error, let me just cross check it again where it is gone. See, robust standard error, if you see, so this is nothing but this is again the similar kind of, this is optimal parameters and this is the robust standard errors. Is basically the software is further refining it. See, in any kind of, this is RSC. Okay, this is RSC. This is further refined, but more or less it is same. If you see the parameters values, this is same. A standard error is also a little bit different, but it is more or less same. So there is none of the difference between the optimal parameters and the robust standard errors. If the model is it is this, if the model is correct, more or less time you will get both the things would be similar. Are you getting my point?
Yes, ma'am.
This is something adjusted which right now I cannot explain you because it requires a mathematical equation, so I cannot explain explain you verbally right now. But one thing you understand, optimal parameters and robust standard errors here for the given parameters what we extracted both are similar, and if your model is explained properly, it will be similar. Okay, it is not it is not, what do you say, it is not conditional heteroscedasticity adjusted, or no, it is not there, it is not something like that. It is completely a different thing, but it requires a mathematical, statement, which right now I don't have it right now here. But one thing to understand, if your model is explained correctly, both the parameters would be, both the results would be similar. You can see, even you can see the estimate part, coefficients values are same, right? Can you compare?
Yes, ma'am.
Coefficients values are same. Only the difference is standard error. So basically, there is a a difference of degrees of freedom. They are the models. Have you heard about R square and adjusted R square?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So if you understand that difference, I hope you can appreciate that difference here also. The way we calculate R square and adjusted R square, both the things will be conveying the same thing, but most of the time adjusted R square we consider in our analysis. So here also things are similar. I hope you understand. You can map these two things with the R square and adjusted R square.
Yes.
Understood? Okay,
Yes,
fine. That's good. Okay. Okay, now how to extract the coefficients. So basically, when you run, this is my model, complete model. When I click on this, you will get the result. So whenever you are extracting any of the coefficient, what you have to do is you just write it like that. Let me just recheck because I just copy pasted it. Yeah. So when I would be writing fit n, basically I'm calling this solution at the rate fit dollar coefficient. This will give me the coefficients of the GARCH11 model. You can see I've run this and you will get the similar extraction of the coefficient. Can you see that? Mu, omega, alpha 1, beta 1. Okay, can you see that? How to extract the coefficient? Okay, now if you wanted to, somebody was asking how to extract the residuals or the variance of the model. So again the same thing, the model which you have run at the rate fit dollar, let's say you wanted to extract the variance, so I will write var and here you go. So if I wanted to see the head of UG var, here I go. You see that? This is my series. I hope it is visible to all of you. Can you see that?
Yes, ma'am, it is visible. You can see
Okay.
that.
Okay. Or otherwise, I can directly write UG var. So it will give me like that. I think it is more visible right now. Okay. So this is all my variance series corresponding to my return series. This is the variance. Okay. This is how this you can use for further analysis for whatever purpose you wanted to do it. Now, if I wanted to extract the residuals, then how do I extract? I will make the residuals and just remove the square because I'm doing a square of the residuals. So I just write residuals and I will run that, and then I will, once I'm running this command, you can see these are the residual series. Can you see that? Okay. Now somebody might be interested how to transfer this data to Excel file. So if you remember my command for writing the data, writing the code from R to Excel, so this will work for you. Just save this to some kind of variable and then you can export into the Excel file. Are you getting my point? Now with the purpose I wrote here is square. So I'll just write it as square. I just wanted to plot a graph. So that's the reason I wrote it as square. I want a squared residual and corresponding the graph with the volatility, and I wanted to see how they're behaving. So this is my graph. So you can see the black line is nothing but the residual plot. and green line is the volatility plot, okay, variance plot. Now you can see whenever my volatility is high, at that time my residuals are also larger, and whenever my volatility is low, corresponding residuals are also low. And you can see near this observations, at the early of the series my residuals are high, and nearly at the end, nearly near to 2020, my again residuals are larger because volatility is high. So this is also one of the plot where you can see. Now coming to the summary statistics, how to obtain the summary statistics uh, of the model which I've run. So this is the way we do. So basically, what we're interested in mean, variance, and then we are interested in skewness and kurtosis. So if I will run this command, okay. By the way, if you might have noticed, there is a Z. Now you might get confused. What is this Z? The Z is nothing but the error term. Okay, so I want to see the error term. What is the mean of the error term? What is the variance of the error term? What is the standard deviation? And what is the skewness of the error term? So this error term is the same what we had in our equation f silent. If you remember the f silent t minus 1, this is the same. This error term is the same, but in the software it denoted by z. Don't get confused. You can write it somewhere. So don't get confused. So I wanted to see the mean. I wanted to see the variance. I wanted to see the standard deviation. I want to see the skewness, and then kurtosis. All right, so this is how you can extract the summary statistics of error term, as well as if you wanted to extract for the variance, you can write var here instead of z. So like that, you can extract the summary statistics. Now I'm going for the diagnostic plot for the error term. So this is the separate thing. Otherwise, you can have the similar thing which I've already. When I plotted the graph, you might have seen I need not to plot it separately, but for your convenience, I'm plotting it separately so you can understand. Okay. So there is called Jagberas test, which is used for the normality test. So when I run the Jagberas statistics, what happens? Let's make the QQ plot. Yeah, you can see the QQ plot here. So this is similar to the plot which I have already shown you before. This is just a separate way of drawing the graph. This says that my this residuals are not normally behaving. Then my serial correlation plot, but this says that there is no serial correlation. And in the result also, if you remember, somewhere I told you the null hypothesis was accepted that there was no serial correlation in the result of the GARCH model. So only the thing is it requires practice, otherwise you can correlate all the things. So there is nothing new which I'm telling. I've already told you not many things before. Now I wanted to plot, let's say I wanted to forecast 20 periods ahead for the Apple return series. So this is how I'm going to forecast, and I wanted to plot the fitted observation. So this is my fitted observation. This is how I plot. See, the plot is very straight line. Why? Because my mean is constant. In my large model, my mean is constant. I'm not using any kind of extra AR or MA term. That's the reason this graph is like that. So this is the way you forecast. And if I wanted to plot the volatility, so basically I'm more interested in forecasting the volatility, let's say for 20 periods ahead, or let's say for one year ahead. So this is how I can forecast the volatility, and this you can see over next 20 days how to interpret that result. Over next 20 days my volatility will be increasing. This graph goes up. So my volatility will be increasing in next 20 days for the Apple stocks. Okay. And now if I wanted to predict the future returns, so what is the command for it? So these are the command. I can predict the future returns, and I can plot. So this is my plot for the future returns. So in next, or so this I plotted for next 10 days. I wanted to see in next 10 days what would be my return, how my returns are going to behave. So you can see in my next 10 days what would be the maximum and minimum return it can go up to. So here you can see the blue dot. So these blue dots shows the lower series shows that my return minimum up to minus somewhere minus 0.03 in next 10 days, and maximum it can go up to 0.03 with the actual returns. Okay, so this is plus minus 3 standard deviation curve kind of. So this is how you forecast. Now, now let us take one application of it. So how this is useful for the portfolio allocation, like this GARS model, whatever we have run. So how it is important for our portfolio? How do we do? What is the practical application of it? So you remember the fit n, that is nothing but the GARS model return. Okay, this is the fit n. I wanted to calculate the volatility of the GARS model, whatever I got the results, what is the sigma, and then I wanted to multiply it by square root of 252. This is my annualized variance. Okay. Now I wanted to weight each of the variance with some weight I want to assign. Let's say I wanted to assign 0.5% weight to each of the annualized variance. And then what I would be doing, I just plot the things and you can see, I'll tell you, I think plotting would be really helpful. And it will give us a lot of insights. Now first you understand this graph first. So upside series talks about the volatility curve and downside series talks about the weight. So let's say if I have a portfolio and I run the GARS model, I got the results, and then I wanted to assign some weights to the volatility, let's say 5% weight to the volatility. So what it says that whenever my volatility goes high, in this period my volatility goes high, I want to assign less weight to those assets, those particular time period, not asset. I'm really sorry to convey that, to those particularly time period. Whenever my volatility goes high, I want to assign less weight to that particular asset in that particular time period in a portfolio. And whenever my volatility goes down, let's say in this period here where my cursor is moving, at that time I wanted to assign more weight to that asset in my portfolio. Are you getting my point? Let's say in 2020 near January, December, my volatility is very high. I wanted to assign less weight to that particular asset during this period. That is how I assign weight to the assets in a portfolio based upon my prediction and observations. Okay, so if I have such kind of phenomena, what I can do is I wanted to see my after assigning the weight, what is my volatility value. So my volatility value somewhere in December 2020 is 15%. Okay, so if I have let's say 10 lakh rupees in the market, and then how do I allocate to the risky asset and non-risky asset? So what this whole phenomena tells us, if I have 10 lakh rupees today and I wanted to invest in a portfolio of risky and non-risky asset, it tells me that if I take this particular time period 2020, December 2020, it tells me that around 15 we multiplied by this weight to the our investment amount. So it says around how much it is, 1,58,000 out of 10 lakhs I should invest to the risky asset, and rest of the amount I should invest to the non-risky asset, which is 8 lakhs. Around 8 lakhs I should invest in non-risky asset based upon my prediction of the volatility of the assets in a given time period and the weight which I've assigned. Now somebody wanted to take more risk. So instead of 5% weight, I can make it 10%. Okay. And now let us see what is the calculation. I wanted to take more risk. Okay. So now you can see the weight, since I have allocated more, my value has increased from 15% to 31%. So if I multiply this particular value with the total investment amount, so it says that if I have 10 lakh rupees, I should assign 3 lakh rupees, nearly 3 lakhs to the risky asset, and then nearly, just a second, then I should, remaining of the amount I should invest in non-risky asset, which is nearly 6 lakhs. So is it clear to all of you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so this is a practical application of the GARCH model, that why do we need to understand the volatility so that we can assign the weight, and then based upon those weights we can assign, we can invest in the portfolio of the risky and non-risky asset. This is how the real portfolio manager does. This is the small example which I have taken, and this is how we do. And if you people like this thing, so we can have a detailed workshop somewhere in December. That is what I'm planning, but depends upon the feedback and other things. So we can plan somewhere in December where we can come up with more practical examples and more, basic. We can start with the basic and go up to the high level. And okay, so apart from that, let us go for the second type of model. Now, as I know, my normal distribution model or with the standard GARCH model is not the best fit, and my result says that there is a scope for the improvement. And my hunch says, after seeing the distribution of the density plot, that student T distribution, because it's a leptokurtic kind of leptokurtosis distribution is leptokurtic. So my hunch says that I should probably go for the skewed student T distribution. So how the code goes, everything remains same. Only the thing is we need to change, instead of non, we will change it to SSTD. That is for skewed student T distribution. Okay, so this is how it goes. And once we will run this particular equation, so you can see everything will fall in place. Now I will run the fit model with the return data. I wanted to see the results. Now these are my results. Now, first of all, let us see for the goodness of it. Instead of going to the parameters, let me first see the goodness of it. Now here you can compare with the previous model where my p-values was less than 5%. And here you can see suddenly there is a jump in the p-values. When I'm using the student T distribution, my p-values has gone up, and they all are above 5%. They are almost 50, 51, 69 for the different groups. So that says that this model is good fit. Of course, this model is good fit. Now let us go back to the parameters. Let us see what parameters do we have. So we have mu, omega, alpha, beta. Now there are two more parameters has been added. One is the skewness parameter and the other is the shape parameter. Okay, mu is the same. It is the mean equation coefficient which is known as A naught. Omega is the coefficient alpha naught in the variance equation. Alpha 1 is the coefficient of error term, lag value of the error term in the variance equation, whereas the beta 1 is the coefficient of variance, lag variance in the variance equation. Now, skewness and shape parameter has also come in this model. Skewness talks about that whether my graph or data is left skewed or right skewed. If the value is 0, it says my data is centrally skewed. I mean, there is no left and right, there is no positive and negative. If it is minus, then that means data is negatively skewed. If it is positive, that means my data is positively skewed, or it is basically left hand side skewed. Okay, right hand side is skewed. And shape parameter, because it is 4.75, so definitely there is a, this is not normally distributed. That is the reason the shape parameter is coming into the picture. Okay, so this defines the kurtosis actually. You can see the p-value. All p-values are significant. All the coefficients are significant. Okay, so that's a good thing about the model. Now coming to the information criteria. If you remember a Kaike value and other information criteria values for the normal distribution, and if you compare with them, so you will find these are the lowest one as comparison to the previous model. So with all the given points, I found this model is much better as comparison to the model which I ran before. Now, the better understanding, visualizing whether the model is good fit or not, let us see the residual plot. So I'm going to plot all the things together. So here you have all the things together. All right. Now, the interesting thing to look at, you can see the graph number 8. Okay, you look at the graph number 8, which is the density plot. And this density plot says that the blue line is the normal density curve, whereas the orange line, this is your fitted curve. This is your fitted density curve, and which implies the Gauch model, which the output which is fitting to the data is more appropriate because this is fitting to the data. Okay, the way the data is uh, the shape of the data, the curve which Gauch model is producing is much better as comparison to the normal curve. Okay, so that student T curve is fitting much better as comparison to the normal curve. Now look at the QQ plot. If you remember previously the QQ plot, we had the blue line which is it was very far away from the black line which is the straight line. But in this graph you can see our blue line observations are nearly falling near the black line. There are few observations. These are the outliers which are falling apart from the black line. Otherwise, you can see the fitted data or the fitted observations are lying above the black line. Okay, so this also says that this model has improved further and giving the better results as comparison to the normal distribution model. Again, you look at the news impact curve because we are using the symmetric Gauch model, so there is no impact of the news you can observe here, but in due course you will see there could be a change in the curve when we are using the GJ Gauch model like that. Just a second, let me go back to the window. Okay, so again these are same thing that you are going to extract the parameters for your convenient. I'm rerunning it again. You can see mu, omega, alpha, beta 1, and you have a skewness and shape parameter. This is how you extract the variance. Then you have the residuals. Then you can plot it again. Okay, so this is just repetitive things which we have done earlier. So there is nothing new. Just repetitive things. So again, where the volatility is high, residuals are spiking up in both the both the end and the beginning of the time series. Summary statistics, yes, again you can plot summary statistics. So I'm just running all the things together. Here you have a kurtosis 3.4, skewness, standard deviation, variance, and mean. Okay, so these are your summary statistics. All right.
Madam,
Now, yes,
ma'am, can you please go to that skewness and kurtosis part of the
this one,
meters?
yeah, this one, or in the result where you want.
I'm in the results, skewness and kurtosis.
Okay.
Skewness and shape. The
Shape parameter. Yeah, shape parameter. Yes. You can see again, I believe your question is near the optimal parameter and robust standard error. You
No,
will
no.
find, okay,
Ma'am,
estimates
actually,
are
I
same.
was asking- Yes.
Estimates are same.
Ma'am,
So
here the coefficient of skewness and the shape.
Hmm.
Ma'am, is this what will be the implication of this coefficient?
Okay.
Actually?
Okay, I'll tell you. The skewness says 1.005, right? So if skewness is not 0, that means my data, and this is positively, my coefficient is positive, right? So it says that my data is positively skewed. So my tail is towards the towards the right hand side, positively skewed. Okay, this says that my data tails is towards the right hand side. My return of in the return series. So let me just make you understand like that. My return series, if I plot the return series, I will find that most of the positive returns are there, and which are towards positive side. In the entire data series, I have most of the larger positive return. Means there are some days which I got very high returns. Okay, so that is the reason those values are very high, but those observations are very less. So what will happen? That will come to the tail part. That will define the tail of the distribution. Since my skewness is it's a positive, so it is a positively skewed. So my tail will come towards the right hand side. So it says I have in Apple stocks, there are days when Apple stock has given me very, very high returns. Okay, not all the time, but there were days when Apple stocks have given extremely outstanding results or returns. Are you getting my point?
Yes, ma'am.
Had it been the negative, since you raised the question, had it been the negatively skewed, I would have explained it in this manner that if it is a negatively skewed, I would have tell that my observation, my data is negatively skewed. So my tail is towards the left hand side, and I would have said that there are some days when the Apple stocks have given negative returns. So there are some days, that means those observations are very less in number. But when it is given negative number, like people have started crying. Okay, so it has brought tears in the eyes of stockholders. That means the returns were very, very negative, or the stock prices have fallen very sharply. So these are towards the left hand side. Are you getting my point? I hope I have
Yes,
made
yes,
you
ma'am.
understand.
Ma'am, positive and negative skewness, then we can just see the sign in front of the coefficient.
Yes, yes, yes,
Ma'am,
yes.
what about that estimate? Is it telling something like 1.005? Is it
No, no. We can't particularly go and define what this coefficient says. Only we can say that by seeing the positive and negative, if the number is large, skewness, if let's say it is 1.005. So right now, what I can interpret that some days in data series I got very high returns. Observations are less, but I have got very high returns. But as the number grows, let's say it is 2.005 or 3.005, so it says my tails are becoming more flatter.
okay?
Okay, it is getting more deeper in shape. Are you getting my point?
And that means if skewness is tending towards zero, that means the tails are quite narrower.
Narrower, that will become the normal
No,
distribution.
close to the normal distribution.
Close to the normal, yes, you are right. Close to the normal distribution. Okay, because normal distribution, neither it is positively tailed or negatively skewed. Okay, it is symmetric across the mean, right?
Yes,
Okay, so shall we move further?
yes.
Yeah. So okay, what I was discussing about. So yeah, I hope you understood about the GART student T GART. Now there is one more model, again the same application that you can do it again. I'm not going through again and again the portfolio location. I think concept I've already given you. What is the purpose? Now going to the GART, this is third type of model, which is called student T GART, a student T distribution. Here you can use, instead of skewed, I'm removing the skewed part. I will only get student T distribution, and I will rerun the plots, everything again. Okay, and you can see the plot here. So first of all, let us see the results. So I will run the coefficient. I will extract the coefficient here. Let me see what are the coefficients. Only skew in this. What will happen? Only the skewness part will not come. Only shape parameter will be there. Only skewness part you won't be understanding it. So I think skewed T distribution is much better as comparison to the only student T distribution, because it will give you a hunch of skewness also. More or less results would be same because I've already run, so I know that results will be same. Now you can see here the QQ plot, it is more or less normal. Okay, it looks like to be normal. Okay, residuals are normally behaving right now in this plot also. Okay, and then I'm not going in detail because everything would be similarly how you are going to read would be similar. I hope you understood. Only skewness parameter will not be there. And let me take you through the GGR GARCH model because I wanted to show you the impact of noise, impact of news curve. Okay, so now, so far what we were doing, we were using S-GARCH model and we will keep on changing the distribution model. But now this is the fourth model, which is called asymmetric GARCH model, and this is one variant of asymmetric GARCH model is GGR GARCH model. GGR GARCH model. So here instead of S-GARCH, we would be writing GJR GARCH. Okay. So, and we are using again with the normal distribution model would be normal, and then again we can change it to student T, skewed student T. Distribution model you can keep on changing, but here the main model I am changing, which is the variance model. Okay, I'm using asymmetric GARCH model. So I'm just rerunning all the things. Okay, these are my results. Now you can see this is a gamma. Hope you remember yesterday equation where we had the gamma parameter, and when then we says if gamma is equals to 0, that means it's a symmetric GARCH. If gamma is non-zero, it is asymmetric GARCH. But if gamma is positive, it says there is a leverage effect. I hope you remember yesterday's lecture. So today when we see in the results, we find my gamma is positive and significant. Okay, rest of the things I'm not reading again because I hope you understood what is alpha, beta, omega, mu. Only gamma I'm reading. In the variance equation, we have a gamma and its coefficient says that it is positive and significant. That says that we have the leverage effect. That means the bad news impact the market more sharply than the good news. Okay, or you can say the market react with the bad news in a much coherent way than the positive news. So when we see the plot, now you can see the plot and the difference. See, there is a plot. Well and good. So since I'm using GJR model with the normal distribution plot, again the normal distribution is not the best fitted, that we know, but as a standard, we start with the normal distribution and then we start implementing or we start, improving the model further. So you can see the QQ plot. Here my residual plot says that they are not normally behaving because they are going apart. Observations are not falling on the line, on the mean line. They are falling apart. And then look at the news impact curve. Okay, look at the news impact curve. So here we have the epsilon t minus 1 and there you have the gamma. Okay, so you can see the negative. When you look at the left hand side, you have the negative values, and when you look at the positive right hand side, we have the positive value. So since we have the leverage effect, our gamma is positive. It says that the bad news hampers the market more sharply than the good news. There is a leverage effect in the market. Can you see that? Okay. So this is the beauty of GJR model. Again, rest of the things are same. I'm skipping it, like how to extract the coefficients and other things. Let me go to something new. So this is my model fit, which says GJR GARCH model with a student T distribution. So I have asymmetric GARCH model. I'm using a skewed student T distribution, and let me see how the results come.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes.
Ma'am, can you please just again state the values of gammas about how it is a bad news is impacting?
Yeah, I'll tell you. In this model only, I will tell you. This is my GGR student T distribution. Okay. So here you again got skewness and shape curve. okay, parameters, right? And then you have the gamma, okay. You can see, look at the gamma value. It is 0.168801. Okay, so this is positive. If you remember the yesterday's talk, we said if the gamma is equals to 0, that makes the model symmetric. That means there is no impact of the news in the market. But if the gamma is greater than 0, it says there is a asymmetric effect of the news in the market, and our model is asymmetric Gauge model. But among, in this particular case, when the gamma is non-zero, there is a particular case where the gamma is positive, greater than 0. So when the gamma is greater than 0, we say there is a leverage effect. Okay, leverage effect means the bad news hampers the market more sharply than the good news. That means when the bad news arises, stock prices fall so sharply, and the volatility at that time period in the market, in the stock prices, would be very high as comparison to when the good news arise to the market. Am I clear to you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, so fine. When I run the GGR Gauge model, let's see how the model has improved. Okay, so now you can see we have a shape and skewness parameter, but I'm more interested to look into the graph because I know the statistics now you can compare. I want to make you the I want you to make you visualize the difference. So now when I'm using GJR skewed student T distribution, you can look at the QQ plot. Now this is coming to the normal shape. Okay, the observations are not falling apart. There are outliers, but they are not falling apart. They are more or less, they are lying over the line, black line. As well as you can again see the impact curve, which says there is a leverage effect because my negative, this says because my gamma is positive, my negative side of the curve falling so sharply. That means the volatility in the market is so sharp at the time when the bad news hit to the market. Then the market is rising. You can see when the volatility is rising, it's very in a gradual manner as comparison to when it is falling. When the market is falling, the volatility in the falling market is much higher as comparison to the rising market. I hope I have made it clear to all of you, right? And then rest of the things are same. Now, one interesting thing which I would like to tell you, how to simulate the returns, let's say for 2021 period, because that is the last thing which I wanted to tell you. So how to simulate the returns for or the price series for, let's say, 1 year ahead, because ultimately the goal of the using Gauge and Gauge model to first understand what is the heteroscedasticity. If it is present, then how to tap this information and to predict future prices. Okay, so what I would be so after running the number of models, what I understand, my GGR Gauge model with skewed student T distribution is better fit, and then this model I'm going to use further for predicting the or simulating the future prices or of the any of the time series. Let's say for Apple. Okay, in this case we are using Apple. So what I'm going to use, I would be using the U-Gauge path, and it will be simulating. I would be simulating 3 time series, and for 1 year ahead, for 1 year period. So I would be taking 252 days. I would be counting 252 days. So this is my part. So I'm just storing all the results here, coefficients and other things, and I'm simulating the series. This is my simulation. I've done the simulation. Now, this is my series 1. This is my series 2. Or let me just combinedly run. This is my 3 series. You can see. These are my 3 series simulated. Yeah. So this is my 3 simulated series 1, 2, and 3, based upon the coefficients which I have extracted from the Garch model. Let me plot and then you can understand. So you can see it here. This is the return series, okay? This is the fitted observations of the return series. So I have simulated 3 time series 1, 2, 3 with the different weighted which I have assigned to the volatility. So I've simulated three series of the returns. I can also plot volatility and you can see the volatility curve of the simulated series. So this is my volatility curve. So now the big question comes: which one should we adopt and which one should we abort? Okay, so after looking at the series, what I found, the series number one series, this is much smoother as comparison to the other 2 series. Okay, so I would be taking this simulation series and I can discard the other 2. It is very subjective. It again depends upon your analysis which series you wanted to have it. I cannot comment that which one you should have. It's again your intelligence and again depends upon your objective, future objectives, or the way you are. I mean, the in the context where you are working, you can take any of these series. But in my understanding, I should take first series because that is much smoother. This is smoothen the volatility as comparison to the other series. Okay, so this is my understanding. Okay, and then I can also simulate the share prices of the Apple. So what I will be doing, I will be taking the tail of the Apple, 2020 because my data. So base data. So in the last observation, I have 2020, which is closing price is 133.72. Based upon that, I will be re-simulating the prices again. Okay, so these are the formula for the re-simulation. So let me off. This is my graph. Price. Earlier, I was simulating for the return and volatility. This is for the price. Okay, so you can see more or less and the reason why I'm choosing the series first, looking at the price, I can say that my price fluctuations are less. Okay, as very much obvious that I told you before, the volatility is quite smooth for the series 1. My price fluctuation is quite smoother as comparison to the other 2 series. Okay, so that is the reason that I wanted to prefer the series 1 over the other 2. You can also see the mat plot where all the series will be together plotted. So you can see my, the red line, the red curve, is much smoother as comparison to the other 2.